Ma'am, just show me some ID and we can clear this up.
No, I don't have to show you ID for walking on a public sidewalk. I know my rights.
You're being uncooperative. That makes me more suspicious.
I'm Dr. Tamara Wallace. I'm the principal of Northside High School. I've lived in this house for 7 years, and I'm not showing you ID because I haven't done anything wrong.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a story that starts with something pretty normal, a dog walk. But this walk, well, it turns into a real-time civics lesson, all of it captured on a police body cam. And this isn't just a story, you guys. It's a really powerful look at what it means to know and actually stand up for your rights.
And that is the calm, firm voice of Dr. Tamara Wallace. With this one simple statement, she's not just talking about a civics class. She is literally about to teach one, right there on a quiet suburban sidewalk.
So this really is the big question, right? How does a totally ordinary dog walk escalate into a full-blown constitutional standoff? It's kind of wild. We're going to follow the chain of events to see not just what went down, but why this one single interaction says so much about community, perception, and the law in America. Okay, so it all kicks off with a 911 call, and it all boils down to this one really misleading label, a suspicious person. So let's find out who this suspicious person actually was. I mean, look at this. The gap between perception and reality here is huge. The entire police response was kicked off by this super vague report about a Black woman who didn't look like she belonged. But the reality, the truth of who she actually is, that tells a completely different story. And get this, we're not just talking about a resident here. This is a pillar of the community. Dr. Wallace wasn't just living in the neighborhood, she was deeply invested in it. A celebrated high school principal and a member of the neighborhood association board. I mean, come on. So that's the backdrop for this whole thing. This wasn't some strange, unusual event. It was the most normal, everyday part of her routine, just walking her dog, Charlie, on the same route they always took. This is in the Westchester County neighborhood she'd called home for 7 years. A home, by the way, that she worked incredibly hard to afford. All right, let's get to the confrontation itself and see exactly how this walk turned into that civics lesson we've been talking about, right there on the sidewalk. So this is the first thing Officer Jason Miller says. The opening question. Not, how are you, or is everything okay? No, it's, what are you doing in this neighborhood? A question that right away, right off the bat, treats Dr. Wallace like an outsider, who has to explain why she's even there, in her own neighborhood.
Wow, Dr. Wallace's response is just immediate and so legally precise. She doesn't just say no, she refuses to show her ID, and then grounds that refusal in a specific legal standard. And then she flips it right back on the officer, basically saying, you need to justify why you've even stopped me.
So let's talk about reasonable suspicion. What is that exactly? It's a really critical legal line. It can't just be a hunch or, a gut feeling. An officer has to have specific, actual facts that point to a crime being committed by the person they're stopping. And let's be real, walking a dog, that just doesn't meet the bar. And then she takes it a step further. She brings up the Fourth Amendment, which is one of the most basic, fundamental protections we have as citizens. She correctly points out that just being stopped like this on the street is a form of detention. It's what the law calls a seizure of her person. And this really gets to the heart of what the Fourth Amendment is all about. It exists to stop exactly this kind of thing from happening, being stopped and questioned by the police for no good reason. It's basically a shield against the government just interfering in your life whenever it feels like it. So what was the officer's justification for all this? When she pushed him on it, his entire reason for the stop came down to that first 911 call. Not a crime he saw, not any suspicious behavior he observed himself. Nope, it was all based on a neighbor's totally subjective, biased opinion that someone didn't belong. And bam, with that one question, Dr. Wallace just cuts right to the heart of it. She calls out the unspoken thing hanging over this whole interaction, forcing the issue of race right out into the open and, importantly, onto the official record of that body camera. So here's the turning point. The officer is faced with a citizen who is calmly and correctly stating her constitutional rights. He has a choice to make here, and he chooses to escalate. So what does he do? He gets on his radio and calls for backup. And listen to the reason, an uncooperative individual. By using that label, he basically reframes her, a person lawfully standing up for her rights, as a threat. And just like that, A simple conversation turns into a multi-car police response. And again, just listen to Dr. Wallace here. She's narrating the whole thing with incredible clarity as it's happening. She spells it out for the record. This escalation isn't because of a crime. It's not because she's a threat. It's because she, a Black woman, had the audacity, as she puts it, to stand her ground. But here's where the story takes a twist. The backup unit arrives, but it doesn't quite go the way Officer Miller might have thought it would. In fact, it changes the entire dynamic of the situation.
So the second officer on the scene is Sandra Hayes, a 12-year veteran of the force. And she rolls up, looks at the uncooperative individual, and she doesn't see a suspect. She sees Dr. Tamara Wallace, the principal from the local high school, someone she recognizes from community meetings.
And right away, Officer Hayes apologizes and says, this should not have happened. That totally validates Dr. Wallace's entire position, right? But for Dr. Wallace herself, this story was far from over. Because this wasn't just about one single mistaken stop. And that's when she tells the officers, this is the 4th time she's been stopped and questioned just for doing totally normal things in her own neighborhood. Checking her mail, taking out the garbage, getting into her own car. You see, this wasn't some one-off isolated incident. It was a painful, recurring pattern.
And that history, that pattern, it takes this whole thing from being about one officer's mistake to a much bigger, much more important conversation about systemic issues.
You know, at one point, Officer Miller offers a quiet apology for the misunderstanding. But Dr. Wallace, she doesn't accept it. She makes it crystal clear this isn't about him or some personal mistake. What she wants isn't just an apology. It's institutional accountability. It's real change. She says, I need your department to do better. And that really leaves us with this final lingering question. Think about it. The 911 call came from a concerned citizen. But Dr. Wallace is a citizen too. A citizen who absolutely deserved to feel safe just walking her dog in her own neighborhood. So it really forces you to ask, whose comfort is being prioritized here? And whose rights are actually being protected?
You know, sometimes just walking your dog, it's not just about stretching your legs. Sometimes it can actually kick off a whole national conversation about justice, about accountability, and really about who gets to feel like they belong.
All right, so let's just jump right into it. 40 million. That is how many times the Bodycam video from this one incident got viewed in just 1 week. I mean, that's just a staggering number, right? And it tells you right away, this wasn't just some local story. Nope, this blew up into a national phenomenon.
So that really brings us to the big question here, doesn't it? How on earth does a simple, routine dog walk explode into something that gets millions of people watching and forces this huge reckoning with some really tough systemic issues? Let's get into it.
Okay, so to really get what happened next, we have to rewind and go right back to the beginning. So picture this. It's a quiet street in Westchester County. You've got Dr. Tamara Wallace. She's an award-winning principal, by the way, and she's just out walking her dog, Charlie. And that's when it all starts. She gets stopped by an officer, a guy named Jason Miller.
And this is where things get really wild. Look at the contrast here. On one hand, you have Dr. Wallace. She's got a doctorate in education. She's an award-winning principal, a pillar of the community, living there for 7 years. And on the other, the reason she was stopped. She was seen as a suspicious person, someone who doesn't belong, a potential criminal. I mean, that disconnect right there, that's the entire heart of this story.
You know, what's crazy is that the injustice here wasn't something people only saw later, in hindsight. No way. This quote, this is from another officer on the scene, and it was all caught on the body cam. It shows that even right there, in that moment, the bias was totally obvious. Officer Miller was literally being called out by his own colleague for treating this woman like a criminal, all because, as he put it, someone made a racist phone call.
But here's the thing. Dr. Wallace was not going to just be a victim in this story. Oh, no. Her response, what she did right then and in the days that followed, that's what turned this whole thing into this incredible case study in how to demand accountability. She decided to fight back. Hard.
And wow, was she strategic. I mean, this is a total masterclass in how to respond. It wasn't just about being angry. She got organized. Look at this. She contacted an attorney, got the body cam footage, and then filed formal complaints, not just with one agency, but with multiple ones. And on top of that, she looped in major civil rights groups like the NAACP. She was building this wall of pressure from every single side, making sure there was no way this was just going to get swept under the rug.
So what happened next? Well, all of her actions, plus the undeniable power of that video evidence, it set off a chain reaction. And this wasn't a small one. It went all the way up to the highest levels of the police department, and even beyond that.
And check out this timeline. It shows just how fast things moved, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, think about it. 6 weeks after the incident, a lawsuit is filed. By 9 weeks, an internal investigation wraps up, and it confirms major departmental failures. And then, at just 12 weeks, Officer Miller is terminated. He's fired for bias-based policing. That is incredibly fast for this kind of thing. Yeah, the final settlement took a bit longer, about 14 months, but those initial consequences, they were swift and decisive. And this is so important. This wasn't just about one bad apple officer. The fallout showed it was a systemic problem. 2 supervisors got disciplined for basically doing nothing. The Department of Justice launched its own investigation, and that led to a federal consent decree, which, if you don't know, is a really big deal. It's basically a legally binding order from the feds that forces the entire police department to change how it operates. We're talking required bias training, community oversight, and federal monitoring for 5 whole years. That's a massive, massive change.
Okay, so we've talked about the reforms, but there was also, of course, a financial side to all this. A settlement. And honestly, what Dr. Wallace decided to do with that money, well, it's just another incredible part of this story.
So after all was said and done, after 14 months in the legal system, the county settled the lawsuit. The final number? $1,650,000. That's a huge figure, and it really shows you just how serious the violations of her rights were.
But look at what she did with it. She could have just taken that money and no one would have blamed her. But instead, she turned her personal settlement into a public good. The vast majority of it, $1.35 million, went into a scholarship fund for underrepresented students who want to become educators. The other $300,000 donated to groups fighting for justice reform. It's incredible. She literally used the payment for her own injustice to try and build a better future for others.
So let's zoom out for a second. Why does this story matter so much? Why did it get 40 million views? I think it's because it hits on this really fundamental, uncomfortable question about who gets to belong and who is always being forced to prove that they do.
And her own words really say it best. The fight wasn't just about this one wrongful stop. It was, as she said, about being treated as suspicious for simply existing while black. That phrase, it just perfectly captures what this whole thing was really about.
And this, for me, is maybe the most powerful and sobering takeaway of all. Dr. Wallace did everything you're supposed to do, right? She got the highest degree, she's successful in her career, she's a homeowner, and none of it mattered. None of it acted as a shield. Her story is this incredibly powerful reminder that all that success, it doesn't protect you from systemic racism, from the sheer humiliation of having to prove you belong on your own damn street.
So what are we left with? We saw an officer get fired, we saw a big settlement, we even saw a federal decree forcing reform. But is that what real accountability looks like? Is that where it ends? Or does real change require something deeper, a fundamental shift in how we see each other and who we automatically assume belongs? That's the question this case really leaves us with.